Hi folks, welcome to the channel. Today's video is going to be a contest entry. This is for Jack at Vinyl Martini. Jack has just celebrated his second year in the VC and he's looking to try and push his subscriber numbers above the 600 mark. Should be a lot more than that really. Jack's a great guy, does great videos and good taste in music. So instead of watching this, go and watch his channel instead if you don't know him. Anyway, Jack 2 or 3 weeks ago set this challenge, this contest. So I hope I haven't missed the end date. Apologies if I have, Jack. Anyway, he's set a 2-part challenge. The first part is the difficult bit, and that's to give a shout out to 2 other VC channels. I hate doing these, not because I don't want to shout out to great channels, it's just that I can never restrict myself to 2, but I'm going to try and follow the rules. And the 2 I've chosen are 2 of my compatriots in the love of Scandi prog, or more accurately Nordic prog, and that's Mr. John Bellamy. John's a great fan of Scandinavian prog, as I am, among a lot of other great types of music. And the second is that I think the American ambassador to the Norwegian Cultural Council, Richard, with his channel Vinylizing Progger. Both of these are great guys and with great tastes in music. Both like prog, so what's not to like? Though both of them have cost me a lot of money here in recent times with their recommendations. Anyway, that's the first part over with, and apologies to anybody, to the other people I should have mentioned. The second part, Jack asks us to show an artist's discography that you're a completist for, or a near completist. Now that could incorporate quite a few for me, but the band I've chosen to do is the Soft Machine, one of the premier bands of the Canterbury prog scene. Now, I am only going to look at the studio albums, not the live albums, of which there are dozens, because I've been planning for a while to do a video on the Soft Machine live. So let's get started, because this could be a long one. And I've had to do notes because this is a band that's history is very complicated. Most albums involve different lineups. So I've had to keep some notes with dates and personnel just to make it easier. Right, the Soft Machine, as I said, were one of the premier bands of the Canterbury scene. They were formed in 1966 and evolved out of what was basically the seed group for the Canterbury scene, and that's the Wildflowers. Their initial lineup was as a 5-piece with Mike Ratledge on keyboards, Robert Wyatt on drums and vocals, Kevin Ayers on bass and vocals, David Allen on guitar, and a guy called Larry Nowlin on guitar as well. Now, Larry Nowlin only lasted a couple of months before he left. They recorded a single and in 1967 and did some demos, and these didn't see the light for a number of years as an album called Jet Propelled photographs, which unfortunately I don't have a copy of. Anyway, they released their first album in 1968, and I have that first album as part of this French twofer, Soft Machine 1 and 2. I'm afraid I haven't got an original copy of the album. By the time they came to do their first album, they were down to basically a trio as David Allen, after having been refused entry back into the UK, probably as an undesirable. He stayed in France and went on to form the equally wonderful Gong. So in this album, we have Mike Ratledge, Robert Wyatt, and Kevin Ayers on guitar and bass. This is the only album which Kevin Ayers played with the band. And it's basically a mixture of psychedelia mixed with more conventional style pop songs and bits of jazz thrown in. For many people, it's their favourite album, and it features superb songs like Hope for Happiness, Joy of a Toy, which became a solo track for Kevin Ayers as well. We Did It Again, and Why Are We Sleeping? Superb stuff. Like I say, Kevin Ayers left after this first album. Briefly, Andy Summers of Police fame joined as a guitarist, but he only lasted, I think, 2 or 3 months again before they were down to a trio again. Ayers. Summers was part of the band when Ayers was still in there after this had been released. He left. They were down to a trio. Then Ayers left. Told you it gets complicated. And he was replaced on bass by Hugh Hopper, another, I think, ex-member of the Wildflowers. And they produced the second of the albums, Volume 2, released in 1969. With that album, the band's music had changed a bit. It was pushing more towards a proggier sound, more jazzy, less psychedelic, but another superb album. So that's the first 2 albums. In 1970, they followed up the second album with probably what is considered by most people, fans and critics alike, as their magnum opus, the album Third. This is a double album and involves both sort of live pieces and studio pieces. It's, as I say, it's a double, basically 4 tracks, 1 track per side. And on this, they've extended the lineup with the inclusion of the great Elton Dean on alto saxophone. We've still got Mike Ratledge, Hugh Hopper, and Robert Wyatt. This was released in June 1970. It includes the very last track that they ever did with lyrics. That's Wyatt's Moon in June. And this marks an even further shift towards more avant-garde, jazz rock and electronic music. Superb album. For once, they managed to keep the same lineup of Dean, Ratledge, Hopper, and Wyatt for what became their album Soft Machine 4th. This moves more into the jazz fusion elements, or mostly straight jazz in some places and free jazz. On here, where you get additional musicians appearing, like Roy Babington on double bass, Mark Sharrig on cornet, Nick Evans on trombone, Jimmy Hastings on flute and clarinet, and Alan Skidmore on tenor sax. So they're helping out the band. As I said, this is far more of a jazz album than what had come previously. And this was their first all-instrumental album, and it was the last to feature their founding member, Robert Wyatt, who left after this. Features the superb tracks Teeth, Kings and Queens, and all of side B's taken up by the suite Virtually. Superb. Next up, we get the album 5, Soft Machine 5. All of their albums up to the 7th were just numbered. For this one, with Wyatt having left, they replaced him with the drummer Phil Howard, who was I think he was put forward for the job by Elton Dean, if I remember rightly, and he was far more of a free jazz sort of drummer, which was suited Elton Dean, who was a free jazzer himself and an experimental saxophonist. But I think the band themselves found that a bit too out there, and they wanted a better sort of timekeeper as a drummer. So they replaced him with John Marshall. So the first side of this features Phil Howard on drums. The second features John Marshall. And on the second side, you also get Roy Babington on double bass again, who appears throughout the second side. And would later become a full-time member of the band. This again was a further move away, a further deeper dive into jazz proper and jazz fusion. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to do live albums, but no option with the next album. This is Soft Machine 6. And this is again another double. Side 1 is a studio album, whereas side 2 is a live record. For this album, we get another lineup change. Still in place are Mike Ratledge on the keyboard and Hugh Hopper on bass. John Marshall retains the drum seat, and in comes Carl Jenkins on oboe, baritone, soprano saxophones, electric piano, grand piano. Carl Jenkins is after this is going to become probably the main member of the band, de facto composer and leader of the band. He came from the great British fusion band led by Ian Carr, Nucleus. John Marshall himself, I think, actually played with Nucleus as well. This was released in February 1973. The live side was recorded at the Brighton Dome and the Guildford Civic Hall during October and November of 1972. There's some superb stuff on here. Tracks like this, Soft Weed Factor, Stanley Stamp's Gibbon album, or B.O., and Chloe and the Pirate, and Hugh Hopper's 1983, which shows elements of influence from Terry Riley. superb album. Next, we have obviously Soft Machine 7. Now, this was my first introduction to the Soft Machine and my first introduction to jazz fusion. For this one, we have another lineup change. Hugh Hopper, by this time, has left the band, and in comes another ex-Nucleus member, Roy Babington, who was obviously already guested with the band on a couple of albums. So he takes over the bass chair. This, as I said, was released in October 1973. I'll just quote what AllMusic said about it because it's a good description. The Softs forged ahead with their riff and ostinato-based music, keyboard and reed melodies, intersecting at unexpected angles with streamlined yet often odd-metered bass and drums, all flowing forward with muted, spacey sonorities and sometimes hypnotic repetition, and of course bridges or codas of echoing keyboard loops. I love this album. I loved it when I first bought it, and I think I like it even more now. It wasn't that well received at the time, I don't think, but it's one of my favourites. Features great tracks like Nettlebed, Snodland, Penny Hitch. Superb. A word I'm going to use a lot for this band. With their next album, they took another stylistic detour in that for the first time since their very first album, they introduced a guitarist into the band. This is the album Bundles that was released in March 1975. And on here, you get the same lineup as 7, but with the introduction of the great Alan Holdsworth on electric and acoustic guitars. And the album is full of his great guitar playing. I think the other star on here of this album is John Marshall's drumming as well. But this is the last album that founder member Mike Ratledge basically played on. Only 2 compositions by him on this album, one of which is only a couple of minutes long. He left the band during the early sessions for the next album. So that left the band with no original members. So this one, with the use of the guitar, is far more into that, what is generally thought of as jazz fusion. Lots of great tracks by Carl Jenkins himself again, particularly the suite that occupies most of side 1, Hazard Profile. I should have mentioned that Alan Holdsworth is also another ex-Nucleus member. So basically, Nucleus have taken over Soft Machine at this point. By the time of the next album in 1976, which was just titled Softs, as I said, Mike Ratledge had quit the band early on in the sessions, and Alan Holdsworth himself had left. He never seems to stay long with most bands. But he was replaced by another excellent jazz rock guitarist, and that's John Etheridge. And on this one, with Mike Ratledge having gone, Carl Jenkins takes over most of all of the keyboard playing, and in comes Alan Wakeman, on saxophones. Alan being a cousin of Rick Wakeman, the Yes keyboardist. This is probably pretty much in the same sort of vein as Bundles. I always see them as a stylistic duo. It's very much in that jazz fusion, led by guitar sort of vein. Excellent, maybe a bit smoother than the first album, but still, for me, highly rated. By 1978, basically, Soft Machine had quit. It's finished. They never seemed to be an altogether happy band. If you read the book on the band, none of the members ever seemed to be happy. I think money was always a problem with the band. So in 1978, I think they called it a day. But in 1979, Carl Jenkins was among a number of musicians who did a tribute album to Stevie Wonder that was called Wondering, released in 1980, and that band was called Roller Coaster. But out of that, a number of the musicians decided to come together to record another album under the Soft Machine title. And for me, this is the weakest album ever. This is Land of Cocaine, which was released in 1981, I think. This features Carl Jenkins on keyboards. It has John Marshall on drums and percussion. Alan Holdsworth returns on guitar. You have Ray Worley on sax and flute. Jack Bruce is on bass. Dick Morrissey, ex-If, is on tenor sax. Alan Parker on rhythm guitar. And John Taylor on electric piano. So a lot of musicians taking place on this album. It has its moments, but it's far too smooth jazz for me. This is one album I don't think should have been under the Soft Machine moniker. It probably should have been just a album credited to Jenkins and Marshall, I think. Like I say, it has its moments, but not a great one. That was the end of the band in their sort of first incarnation, trench of albums. There are a couple of outliers that are worth mentioning in their discography. Now, these are only on CD. The first is this one, Spaced. This was recorded in 1969. So this was between the first and the second album. So features the Hopper, Ratledge, Wyatt lineup with some help from Brian Hopper on saxophones. This was highly experimental music featuring drones and loops, tape loops, that was done for a multimedia event at the Roundhouse in London in 1969. Totally instrumental. Probably, like I said, their most experimental album. Probably not to everybody's taste. But just listened to parts of this morning, and it's really good. And a later one, there's another outlier in their discography, is this one, Rubber Riff from 1976. So this comes, I think, after Softs, but before the Land of Cocaine album, obviously. It features the lineup of Carl Jenkins on keyboards and sax, John Etheridge on guitars, Roy Babington on bass, John Marshall on drums, and Carl Jenkins' wife, Carol Barrett, on keyboards. Now, this is basically just an album of library music. It's not particularly exciting. Depends how much you like your library music. But I think it points towards what the Landa Cocaine album would be like. So while the band was no more, as is the want with the jazz scene and the Canterbury scene, a lot of these acts worked together, and there were a number of bands between 78 and right up to modern day that are offshoots of Soft Machine. The first one is these lot, Soft Head. This was an album by the lineup of Hugh Hopper, Elton Dean, Alan Gowan, best known for early work in national health, among other things, and Dave Sheen on drums. The names taken from their first letters of their first names: Hugh, Elton, Alan, and Dave. So it's Soft Head. This is actually a live album, so again I lied when I said I wasn't going to show any live albums. But this is, if you like Soft Machine at their best, you've got to do yourself a favour and pick up these other albums. You also had, from that lineup, Dave Sheen, the drummer, left after they just did this one album, I think. I think they only ever did one gig as well. And he was replaced by the great Pip Pile, ex-Gong. So the D becomes P, so we get Soft Heap instead of Soft Head. And this is an album of all new material. Again, very much in that Soft Machine vein. So you've got Elton Dean again, Alan Gowan, Hugh Hopper, and Pip Pile. And this one was released in 1978, I think. 79. Another band that was formed of Soft Machine members was a band called Software, which was Elton Dean, Hugh Hopper, John Marshall, and also featured Keith Tippett on keyboards. They were only together for a short while and produced one, just did one gig. But they were around from, I think, 1999 to 2002. So they were around a while but didn't do a lot. But in 2002, when Tippett was unavailable for some reason, Alan Holsworth was brought into the band to play on guitar, and they renamed themselves Softworks. And in 2003, they did their only studio album, Abracadabra, which again consists of all new material. But during a Softworks tour of Japan, two of the members, Elton Dean and Hugh Hopper, decided to do an album with two Japanese musicians, Hoppy Kamiyama and Yoshida Tatsuya, the latter I think being a member of the Japanese noise band Ruins. And they did this Soft Mountain album, which was basically two 45-minute jams, each one edited down to about 30 minutes. This is a really good album. And coming to virtually the up-to-date, The next band that took over the Soft Machine mantle, if you like, was Soft Machine Legacy. They were started in 2004, came out of Softworks, but with John Etheridge replacing Alan Holsworth for the second time. Like I say, they named themselves Soft Machine Legacy. After Elton Dean died in 2006, his place was taken over by Theo Travis, the great saxophonist and flautist from Gong and from The Tangent, the prog band The Tangent. And in 2006, they recorded this album, Steam. So it's John Etheridge, Hugh Hopper, John Marshall, and Theo Travis. I saw them a couple of times in their early days, and they were superb. In fact, this was bought at the gig where I think Hugh Hopper, unfortunately, was ill, and his place was taken by Fred T. Baker. And I had the band sign the CD. So yeah, Fred Thelonious Baker took over from Hugh Hopper, unfortunately. Was suffering from leukemia and died sadly in 2009. And eventually his place was taken by another ex-member, Roy Babington, came back into the band. And in 2015, they decided to drop the legacy portion of the name and just revert to the Soft Machine. So now we have a band out there with the name Soft Machine again, the first time since, I think, a short reunion in 1984. That comprised John Marshall again, John Etheridge, Roy Babington, and Theo Travis. Then in 2021, Roy Babington had to retire from the band, and he was replaced again by Fred Thelonious Baker. And then sadly in 2022, John Marshall had to retire. He passed away in 2023, and his place on drums was taken by Asaf Sirkis. So the band is still going. They've done a couple of albums, supposedly excellent. So that's my Soft Machine collection, with the exception of all the live recordings. I hope you found that of interest. Thank you again to Jack for setting up this contest. Good luck to you. Hope you go on for many more years, and hopefully for your next contest you're looking at 1,000 subs or more. Anyway, take care everybody. See you soon. Bye.